Chapter 3, Part 2, Supply and Demand. We're going to jump back and finish up our discussion of individual supply and market supply. We took a little detour to cover shortages and surpluses because I thought it made a good example at that point. It's apart from the end of the chapter, but I felt it fit better in the middle as kind of a real-life supply and demand example. We're going to jump back to supply here. Each producer is willing and able to produce a good or service if he or she can make a profit. Well, obviously, if you can make money making cheeseburgers, you're going to do it. And I also always put in the caveat that you usually have to enjoy it and have a desire to do it. The amount produced depends on its price. If the price that you can charge for your cheeseburgers goes up, more will be produced. If the price goes down, less will be produced. Once again, this can be a little counterintuitive at first, but if you can sell your cheeseburgers for $5 a piece, you're going to make as many cheeseburgers as you can. Well, and you find a way to make even more if you could sell them for $100 a piece. If the price goes down, you're not going to make as many. Your motivation goes away at that point. If you can only sell them for 20 cents each, you're not going to get into fancy production methods. You're not going to invest into your business because there's not going to be very much profit in it, not very much margin. And if it gets low enough, you're going to stop making it altogether. And once again, the market supply is the collective, the total sum of all of the individual supplies. Sorry for... What we have here is with equilibrium is only one price and quantity combination that is compatible with the intentions of both buyers and sellers. In other words, it's the point where the supply and the demand curve intersect. So as you can see, the blue line is the supply curve. As the quantity increases, the Q on the bottom increases, the price increases. The red line is the demand curve. As you can see, as the price decreases, the demand increases. So the red line moves further out on the quantity supplied as the price on the left goes down. And there's a place where the two interact, and that's the equilibrium point. And according to economic theory, all items are priced at the equilibrium point. Once again, that's assuming all things equal in a perfect world. The people have figured out how to price things so that they're right at the equilibrium point. I have personally found that this rarely happens. I find that typically things are priced too high. And here's how you know. Not always, but quite often. If you go into a clothing store and you find an item that has been there for a while, then it's priced too high. Items should move relatively quickly. Space in a store is limited. The example I typically use in class is in the old days when you go to a music store. I remember when CDs first came out. When CDs first came out in the late 80s, I remember going to the music store and I saw a CD that I really wanted. And it was $17.99. And I thought, wow, that's too expensive. But price will come down. It was a pretty new CD at that point. I checked on that CD about every 6 months for the next 10 years or so. So for the next 10 years, I checked every 6 months, and the price on that same CD never changed. And it was the same one, because the dust was building up in the grooves on the plastic case that came in, so you didn't steal it. They put it in this huge piece of plastic. And the price never changed. It was the same one. It had the same stickers and the same pattern. I knew that they weren't selling them and replacing it with new ones. It was the same CD, and it never changed. And the only reason I stopped looking for the price after 10 years was that the store went out of business. And I thought, no wonder that store went out of business. They kept trying to charge the same price. They were obviously off of equilibrium. If they had lowered that price $1 every year, $1 every 6 months, that would have sold. I probably was a buyer at $13 or $14 and maybe $12. But if they kept lowering the price, if they realized, you know what, no one's going to pay this for $18, $17.99, no one's going to pay this, and they had lowered the price accordingly, it would have sold. Eventually, it's going to sell. And they would have found that equilibrium point, but that store had no desire to find the equilibrium point, and they went out of business. Other times you see it go the other way. Walmart is a good example. I love this particular kind of canned tuna that comes in garlic and olive oil, and it's in a can and has a pop top, great snack at work. And other people obviously love this tuna as well. They cannot keep it on the shelves. They sell it for about $1 a can, and every time I go into Walmart or my wife goes into Walmart, we check for the tuna. We find it about 1 out of every 10 times we go. And then when we do find it, we buy every can they have because we all enjoy it. And we clear out the shelf. And I get the feeling other people do the same. That's a failure on the supply side. They're not charging too much, they're charging too little. They should be charging enough to where they can keep the shelves stocked. If you can't keep the shelves stocked, your price is too low. One of the places I've always thought violated this is In-N-Out Burger. In-N-Out Burger always has a line around the corner. They could barely serve the number of people that want to eat there. I love the fact that their meals are inexpensive, but they really should be charging more and they'd make a lot more money. They'd still have a line. It wouldn't be as long, and they would increase their profits. It's not their model, and I respect their model. They're a Christian company, and I love what they do, but they are violating the equilibrium point. I just skipped the last slide because it was all stuff that we had talked about. Equilibrium. Markets reach equilibrium because buyers have a demand behavior and sellers have a supply behavior. And the market, the invisible hand, is supposed to lead these two to the equilibrium point. And once again, it rarely happens perfectly, but there are certain instances where it does come together. It is difficult, though, to anticipate, for a car company to anticipate the number of cars that will be demanded at the price you can sell it at. It's very hard to anticipate that because the manufacturing decisions are often made so far in advance. And how many of those cars do you need to make in brown, silver, white, black? And because the demand for each will be different and different prices. You can see how incredibly complicated it'll be. What if you make something, a lot of something, and there's no demand for it? How do you get rid of it? Do you drop the price until someone eventually buys it? But then by doing so, you may decrease the perceived value of your other products. Flat screen TV is a great example. If a company, and I know for a fact because I have a friend who works at Sony, Sony manufactured quite a few lower end TVs, and nobody wanted TVs in certain size groups. The 37-inch TV was not a popular model. The 32-inch, not a popular model. People wanted to start in the 40s. And because for just a little more money, you can get a much bigger TV. So they had a hard time selling those 32-inch TVs. Well, they dropped the price, but by dropping the price, they actually reduced the sales of their more expensive TVs because as price dropped below a certain level, the perceived quality and the perceived value of the more expensive TVs came down. So when the people saw, well, there's a Sony 32-inch on super clearance for $199 and they can't get rid of them because there was no demand at that size, that didn't decrease the quality of the 52-inch, which was very well reviewed, a great TV, but people perceived it as less valuable because of the low price on the 32. So people stopped buying the Sony 52 and started buying the Samsung. And Samsung's sales increased when Sony dropped the price of the 32-inch. You can kind of see the connection there. So Sony learned its lesson and brought the price of the smaller ones back up, even if they would never sell anymore, so that they could keep getting their money on the bigger TVs. So how do you resolve a market surplus? This is the amount by which quantity supplied exceeds the quantity demanded. The price is too high. Buyer and seller behaviors kick in, and price will fall to the equilibrium price. So in my example of the CD, this would mean that the store would drop the price until they hit the equilibrium price and it would sell. That's economic theory. In reality, that doesn't always happen, but at times it does. That's when things go on sale. It's because there was no demand at the original price, so it goes on sale in order to bring the price down to an equilibrium point. Resolving a market shortage. When there's not enough of something, quite often you raise the price. I don't think sellers often take advantage of this like they should. How often do we see a shortage for products, and when they are finally available, the price is the same as it was before the shortage? I think we see this quite often for video game systems. When the new PlayStation 2 and 3 came out, there was lines around the block, you couldn't get them. iPhone, another example. When the iPhones first came out, there's a shortage of those. When the iPad first came out, shortage of those. They should be charging more money for those according to economic theory. Or maybe even start the price much higher when they know there's going to be this incredible demand, and that way the demand will stay stable and the profits will be maximized. Of course, there is a school of thought that says you keep the price stable throughout and your customers become loyal and make more purchases in the future if they don't feel like they're being gouged by high prices. That's a very valid point of view and might be true as well. A little harder to quantify, but it's probably true as well. Once again, just an example of how true supply and demand is extremely rare. When you say all things being equal, they never are. What causes price to change? Prices change when equilibrium is upset. Change in demand, change in supply, anything can cause the price to change. Change in price of a substitute, and which once again would change the amount demanded. If the price of Coke goes down, Pepsi has to drop their prices too to keep up. With demand increases, buyer behavior change. Something becomes more popular. People want it. It creates a shortage, and so prices are increased. So when all of a sudden everybody wants something more, think of a kid's toy at Christmas, or Christmas ornaments. Nobody wants Christmas ornaments, or very few, in July. There's a much bigger demand in December and November. So demand will increase, and when demand increases, supply increases and price increases. You can see that in the graph. Demand 1 has a lower supply and a lower price than demand 2, the two equilibrium points. Demand decreases. Demand decreases happen when buyer behavior shifts, when something goes out of style. Think of typewriters when word processors first hit the market in the 80s. The demand for typewriters plummeted and plummeted for 10 years thereafter. So there was a surplus of typewriters. They were still producing all these typewriters. Nobody was buying them. So the demand fell. So the quantity supplied fell. They stopped making as many. And the price dropped as well. Think of VCRs. Remember how VCRs were, I remember in the 70s, them being $1,200 for the cheapest one. And then the prices slowly fell over the years. And currently, for I think it's $29, you can go into Walmart and buy a little VHS player if you need one. DVD players, same thing. Prices started really high, came down. You can now buy a little VHS or DVD player at Walmart for about $30 because the quantity demanded has dropped tremendously over the years. And the quantity supplied has dropped and the price has dropped. Supply increases. Sellers' behavior changes and the supply shifts to the right. The equilibrium is upset. As the supply shifts to the right, you could see the changes, the price drops, that a surplus happens and the price drops and a new equilibrium is established. And you can also see that the quantity increases as the price falls. Remember, as price falls, the quantity will increase. So as supply decreases, what happens when supply increases? The supply shifts to the left. You can see the price, this is a shortage. So the supply, when there's less supply, of course there's a shortage, the price will increase. Think of gasoline. Okay, when we hear in the news a refinery is closed for repairs, well, that supply decreases and price increases. And once again, the quantity supplied also decreases. Gasoline's a great example for this because when you hear about a refinery closing for an emergency or just routine maintenance, and that quantity shifts to the left, you know price has to go up, and this explains why. So in summary, when do prices change? When market is in disequilibrium, when there's a shortage, a surplus, when tastes change, when income changes, when something creates a shift out of that equilibrium point. And the question is, how often does that happen? When do we get out of equilibrium? All the time. And some businesses, many times a day or many times an hour. And other businesses, maybe weekly or monthly. But it happens and things change. That's why prices don't stay the same all the time. That's why the quantity doesn't stay the same all the time. Things are in constant flux. Market outcomes. The market mechanism affects what, how, and for whom to produce. Remember this from previous chapters. Markets determine which goods are desired and which are profitable. Market-seeking producers will strive to produce goods in the most efficient way they can, and to obtain goods, one must be both willing and able to purchase it. And that's what drives the market.